Super Bowl 59 goes to the Philadelphia Eagles, and once again, the blueprint to beating the Chiefs is out there. Will the Raiders follow it? That plus more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for February 10th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you, whether you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking us out on the YouTube page. You know, we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your support, Raider Nation, and because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day. And so we shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Producers. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, we do go back to calls and texts this time. I know we didn't have any last week. We'll get back at it. 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts will close out the show. Coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Segment number 2, the blueprint is out there. Once again, we see with our own eyes when you witness Super Bowl 59 what it's going to take to beat the Chiefs consistently. Will the Raiders build a team that can do that after seeing the blueprint once again right in front of them? That's coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day, as we always do. And we'll jump into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'll tell you more about them later on in the show. And I also want to give a big shout out to my guy, Ryan Hogue, former Raiders wide receiver, was riding shotgun with me side by side here on the podcast all week long. He did a phenomenal job on Radio Row in New Orleans. We had a really good time, talked to a lot of people. Hopefully you enjoyed those shows. I know I enjoyed them. I know he enjoyed them. But like I said, Raider Nation, hopefully, more importantly, you enjoyed them. It was a different scenario, right? Different type of setting because we were there for Super Bowl 59. So I tried my best to kind of take you behind the scenes of what was going on so it can almost feel like you were there. So hopefully we did a good job of that. If not, we apologize, but we really did try to do our best to make sure that we kind of put you in the middle of everything that was going on there in New Orleans. I know some people appreciate it, but you know, it doesn't always work and always go over the way it's supposed to for everyone. But again, big ups to my guy, Ryan Hogue. I thought he did a really good job. Now on Sunday, speaking of Super Bowl 59, we saw the Eagles defeat the Chiefs 40-22. And it wasn't even that close, right? There was some garbage time scores by the Kansas City Chiefs that made the score a little bit closer and made it look like, well, maybe they'll have a chance. No, not really. That Philadelphia Eagles team just dominated them. It was 24-0 at halftime. Patrick Mahomes sacked 6 times, picked off twice. Jalen Hurts, he was the MVP, 17 for 22, 221 yards and a couple touchdowns. He did have 1 interception and then carried the rock 11 times for 72 yards. But honestly, the defense could have been the MVP. The defense was dominant. I mean, they had Patrick Mahomes on skates. Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator, he did a heck of a job. And, of course, the front four of that Eagles defensive line, they were phenomenal. Patrick Mahomes dropped back, 43 times, and they didn't blitz one time, but yet they had him on skates the whole game. So, as I mentioned, the blueprint, yeah, they put the blueprint out there. We'll talk about it coming up, segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before Super Bowl 59, of course, all the different networks from Fox to CBS to ESPN to NFL Network all had their pregame shows, and there's a lot of conversations just going around the league. There was a lot of conversations all week long on Radio Row, just the different storylines that is going on in the league, and, of course, some of the main big storylines have to do with the Raiders, right? Their quarterback situation, Max Crosby, what's going on with him and his contract situation, and the fact that there's still a little bit of smoke on, is he going to be on the Raiders in 2025 or is he not? Mike Garafolo, he was teamed up with Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero and Judy Bautista from the NFL Network, actually talked about the Raiders, their quarterback situation, and Max Crosby.
Yeah, let's talk about the Raiders because you got a new regime there from top to bottom in that organization, and they're going to have to make some decisions at the quarterback position. I said decisions. Are you looking for a blueprint? Look at the last time that Pete Carroll joined an organization. The Seahawks traded for Charlie Whitehurst. They signed Matt Flynn, and then they drafted Russell Wilson, and they weren't afraid to start Wilson, who was a third-round pick. General Manager John Spytek mentioned the day that he was introduced, you're seeing that right there, that he's on board with that approach. So expect the Raiders to make multiple plays to fill the quarterback position, and then again, not be afraid to start whoever winds up being the best player for them at the position. Then there's Max Crosby on the other side of the ball. He's in the mid-20s when it comes to millions per season that he's paid. You guys wrote a story for NFL.com. There's going to be a shift in the pass rusher market. You talked about his future being up in the air. I agree with that. Max Crosby, you would wonder if he doesn't get a new deal from the Raiders. After seeing some of the deals that these other pass rushers are going to get, could he then push for a trade? There hasn't been a trade request at this point, but you have to wonder if he thinks he's going to be a cornerstone part of this franchise or maybe a trade chip for them. We'll see how that all plays out.
That was Mike Garofalo from the NFL Network talking about the quarterback situation and also talking about Max Crosby. And I do respect the fact that Pete Carroll went in Seattle and they didn't have a quarterback, did everything he could to get a quarterback, from, signing a free agent, for trading for one, for going out into the draft and getting one. Just keep on working to get a guy until they finally landed on Russell Wilson, and that ended up being their difference maker, their guy that they needed. And look, the Raiders need to find their guy. Does it need to be an elite quarterback? No, but he's got to be a guy that they have some confidence in, could go win games with their arm. Again, we'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2. That's part of the blueprint. And then you hear the conversation about Max Crosby, and well, that's going to continue to happen. I don't think he's going anywhere. As you heard Mike G say, there has been no trade request. I don't think that there's going to be a trade request. I think he's going through negotiations right now, and that's just kind of what it is, right? I guess he's letting it be known, talking to different outlets and not saying firmly like, hey, I want to be a Raider. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to be a Raider for life. He's not coming out and saying that. So it just leaves a little bit of, well, maybe there's a chance that he goes somewhere. And you know what? Maybe there is a chance that he goes somewhere. We don't know. Right? The Raiders as a team, John Spytek, Pete Carroll and company, have to decide exactly what Max means to the organization as far as monetary, right? We know what he means to him as far as a player on the field and his leadership and what he can bring as an edge rusher and the competitiveness that he brings. But what does that mean as far as his contract that has no guaranteed money? That's something John Spytek and company will have to figure out. Again, I don't think Max is going anywhere, especially after that opening press conference. I feel like that the Raiders are looking for 11 guys on each side of the ball that go out like Max does and gives maximum effort. But obviously that's not a reality. So we'll see. But that's going to be a conversation. That's going to be a storyline until it's not, just like the Raiders in their quarterback position. And I'll just say this. I've said it before. But Raider Nation, just be ready. The Raiders will be associated with every free agent quarterback, every tradable quarterback, every draftable quarterback. They will be associated with every one of those guys. Sam Darnold, that's one that I saw already rumored, right? The Raiders are rumored to be interested. Aaron Rodgers, we just found out on Sunday that he will not be back in New York. So now all of a sudden, the Raiders are the second highest odds. They have the second highest odds to land Aaron Rodgers. So they're interested in Sam Darnold. And then they also have the second highest odds to land Aaron Rodgers. And then, of course, if Aaron Rodgers brings Devontae Adams, it brings – no, right? I mean, there's so many different – like I said, you're going to hear so many different guys associated with and tied in with the Raiders. Take it with a grain of salt. I mean, yeah, there's a possibility that any of these guys could sign with the Raiders or they can make a move to get these guys. But it's very easy because of the quarterback situation with the Raiders to just attach them automatically. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, one of those guys could return to Pittsburgh. Neither one of those guys could return to Pittsburgh. Their names are going to be in the mix. Draft picks, whether that's Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, that could be a guy like Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers, right? Jalen Milroe. It could be any of those guys. All of a sudden, somehow, some way, through the offseason, now that it's officially the offseason for every team, the combine's going to be coming up pretty soon. Every single name that's available is going to be associated with the silver and black. So I just throw that out there as a PSA, just as a warning. Just buckle up. Don't take everything at face value because everything is not everything. It's not all equal as far as I'm concerned. My final little note I have for you before we get to segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast and talk about the blueprint to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. The Raiders in Las Vegas submitted a letter of intent to the NFL to host a Super Bowl in either 2029, 2030, or 2031 at Allegiant Stadium. Word could come down this calendar year on next Super Bowl that will be in Las Vegas. That's from our guy Vinny Bonsignor from the Las Vegas Review-Journal and also Raider Nation Radio 920. And the Raiders and Las Vegas are going to start hosting the Super Bowl more times than not. They're going to start being in the heavy rotation. The NFL loves being in Las Vegas. You're going to see multiple drafts end up in Las Vegas. You're going to see multiple Super Bowls. And I do believe that a city like Arizona will probably take a step back as far as the heavy rotation that they're under, because they have been under heavy rotation when it comes to getting the Super Bowl there. So I think that that's probably going to go away. Not go away completely, but just kind of ease back a little bit as they slide Las Vegas into the rotation. So the Raiders and Vegas are clearly very interested in once again hosting a Super Bowl. So we'll find out when that'll happen sooner rather than later. Sooner rather than later, someone's got to consistently beat the Chiefs, right? Well, the blueprint is out there. Can the Raiders build their team to do that consistently? Well, what is that going to take? We'll talk about it coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of our great sponsors on the show, and that is LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. All you got to do is post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions, then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And how about a pro tip? Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about the blueprint that once again is out there for every team across the league, including the Raiders, to find out how to beat the Chiefs. What it is, what is their kryptonite? We saw Tampa Bay beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. Oh, Tom Brady was the kryptonite. No, the defense was the kryptonite, right? Mahomes was running for his life. That's what led Tampa Bay to the victory. That's what got them their Super Bowl win. That's what knocked off the Chiefs. And, yeah, having Tom Brady is fantastic. Really good quarterback. But it wasn't him doing the heavy lifting. It was the defense. We just saw on Sunday, Super Bowl 59, Philadelphia beat the Chiefs. Their defense made Mahomes run for his life. 6 sacks. Picked twice, including a pick 6. Like, he had a miserable day. Talking after the game, he's like, I didn't have a game that was up to my standards. And really, it couldn't be up to his standards because he was on the run the whole game, right? That Philadelphia front four was dominant. He dropped back to pass 43 times, and they got home 6 times for sacks. They had a strip sack as well later in the game. But that pick 6 that they had another interception right before half. It was 24-0 at halftime. Right? I mean, it was like, I was like, wait, hold on. What am I watching? I was hosting a watch party at the M Resort, and I'm like, man, what, 24-0? Who had that on their bingo card besides nobody? Right? I mean, that was wild, but they didn't have to blitz. They were able to get home. Their front four is just so dominant. Jalen Carter, and I know he's a sore spot for a lot of Raider Nation. They wish that they had him. The circumstances just were not going to allow the Raiders to draft him because of his off-the-field situation. That's unfortunate. He's a young kid. People are going to make mistakes, but it just the timing of his mistake he made while at Georgia and the newness and the freshness still of the Henry Ruggs situation was not going to allow the Raiders to be able to draft him and try to say, hey, we'll keep an eye on him. We'll have a plan for him. We'll rehab him. Not even rehab him. That's the wrong word, but just kind of, like I said, kind of mentor him to stay on the straight and narrow. It just wasn't going to be possible. But, you know, they've got Smith on the line, who was his Georgia teammate. They've got Brandon Graham, who was, remember, he was on IR. He came back for the Super Bowl and had a dominant performance. Sweat. How about Sweat? He was dominant. I mean, that front four was nasty. Well, the Raiders have that, right? They have Max Crosby. They have Christian Wilkins. They have Tyree Wilson, K'Lavon Chason, maybe Malcolm Kuntz if they decide to bring him back. Chason would be a returner as well because he's a free agent. But, I mean, they have the recipe to have a pretty nasty and solid defensive line. Do they need to have some depth behind it? Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But they have that. And to the Eagles' credit, I got to give them a lot of credit. What they saw that they needed to improve on, they went and did. And what I mean by that is in 2023, when they were 10-1, then they had that collapse down the stretch. All they did and all we saw as NFL fans was their cornerbacks, especially James Bradbury, get old fast. You saw him lose not 1 step, but 2 steps. So what did they do in this past draft in 2024? They went out and got Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo really early. Then they went and got Cooper DeJean also really early out of Iowa, the cornerback. And, oh, by the way, DeJean had a pick 6 in the Super Bowl, right? Rookie year. It was his birthday on Sunday. And that's how he celebrates his birthday with a pick 6 and a Super Bowl victory. Not bad. It was Saquon Barkley's birthday as well. So that's kind of cool that both teammates were able to celebrate the Super Bowl on their birthday. But they went out and identified what they needed. Howie Roseman has always been a GM that builds in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line. Do you see how big the Eagles' offensive line is? They outweighed the Chiefs' offensive line. If you were doing the tail of the tape, kind of comparing the two, by 132 pounds. That's a lot, right? And I'm not saying every offensive line to be dominant has to be just monsters, right? You could build it however you want to, but you have to have that offensive line that's dominant so you can have that solid run game like the Eagles do, right? Saquon Barkley went for 2,000 bills in 2024, right? I mean, over 2,000 yards. That was an incredible season by him. Obviously, he's a special back. He did a lot of the heavy lifting. They have playmakers on the outside in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. You saw Devontae Smith with the go route touchdown, and then you saw A.J. Brown with a nice little crossing pattern touchdown. Those guys are dominant. They didn't have to be dominant as far as the stat sheet goes. Jalen Hurts also didn't have to be dominant as far as the stat sheet goes, but he just found ways to win games, and he does enough. And on top of that, he has the ability to do more, right? He just doesn't have to. And so he gets knocked for, well, the numbers. The numbers aren't going to look as good as, vintage Patrick Mahomes or what Josh Allen's putting up, or even with the numbers that Lamar Jackson's putting up. I mean, Jalen Hurts won the MVP, 17 for 22. That's efficient, right? 5 incompletions, 221 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He did have a pick that was kind of a careless throw, but okay. He had a pick, and then he ran the ball 11 times for 72 yards. That's a really good day. It's not an elite day. It's not elite quarterback, but it's that next tier, right? There's the elite quarterbacks in the leagues. You're talking about the Mahomes, the Allens, the Burrows, and the Lamars. And then there's the next tier, right? And you probably have about, 6 to 7 quarterbacks. The Raiders need to find that guy. They need to find a quarterback in that second tier. And again, it doesn't matter where you find them. If it's a draft pick, fine. If it's a free agent, fine. I don't see a free agent out there that I think is going to be that guy. Every person we talked to on Radio Row last week in New Orleans, every single conversation about the Raiders were, well, they have this, that, and the other, but what are you going to do at quarterback? Who's your quarterback going to be? Every single person we talked to a T, who's your quarterback going to be? The biggest question that the Raiders have is that quarterback. They've got to find a guy that they believe in that can get it done. Again, I don't think anyone's going to look at Jalen Hurts and say he's an elite quarterback, but he's been in the Super Bowl twice in the last 3 years, and he's got winning traits. He had winning traits when he was at Alabama. He has winning traits when he was at Oklahoma. There's a reason why in 2020 I was pounding the table for the Raiders to get him, and this is not for me to try to toot my horn because I was picking Jalen Hurts. Not at all. But the Raiders need to find a guy like that. They need to find a guy similar to Jalen Hurts, right? A guy that has winning traits, a guy that they believe in, just like what Russell Wilson did for Seattle once he got there, right? I mean, he wasn't an elite quarterback. I think that he had elite moments when he got, a little bit further down in his career, and now we know that he's on the back nine of his career, but he had elite moments, but I don't think Russell Wilson was ever an elite quarterback, but he was really good, right? He was able to make some throws when they needed him to. He was able to get out of harm's way when needed to, and he was just able to execute the offense and be very efficient, just like Jalen Hurts. That's what the Raiders need to have. And I know some people are pounding the table and saying that they still want to see what Aiden O'Connell has, and that's fine. The problem with Aiden O'Connell since college is consistency. He hasn't been consistent. The Raiders need to find someone who they know what they're going to get game in and game out. Simple. So, I mean, everyone's going to have a bad day at the office. I get that. But you have to have confidence that you know what this guy is going to be game in and game out. He has a certain standard, and he's going to live up to it. And what you expect, your expectations when you watch him play, he's going to live up to those expectations. Just like I need to live up to those expectations that you have when you listen to the Locked On Raiders podcast. And if I don't, then shame on me, right? Whatever your expectations happen to be, I need to live up to those, right? And I've obviously got to have expectations and standards for myself as well. But it's just one of those things. And obviously you're talking about now the quarterback position. But again, the blueprint's there. And look, Antonio Pierce understood the assignment. He understood the blueprint. Now, he didn't have the guys to get it done. He had some of them, but he didn't have all of them. Obviously he made some mistakes along the way in hiring some people to help build the team into that mold. So that didn't work, and that's why he doesn't have a job now. But literally, he understood the assignment. He wanted the Raiders to be what? A defensive-led team, a team that runs the ball really well downhill, and a quarterback that is efficient, consistent, and is not going to make a bunch of bad plays. So this is not something, this recipe, this blueprint that I'm talking about, that I think is going to be cured and fixed overnight. I don't. But I know that the Raiders have a good launching point with all the free agency money that they have, salary cap space that they have, and also the fact that they have like 10 draft picks. You can really do a lot of the heavy lifting right now. So John Spytek's going to have to go through and figure it out, right? He saw it work in Tampa Bay. He saw it work on Sunday for Philadelphia. The Raiders have seen it work when they went into Kansas City on Christmas in 2023 and executed it perfectly. So it's there, right? You just have to go out there and get it and build that team that way. And I don't care if you get the quarterback immediately or if you get other players in place first. That's fine. But you just know that you have to get it done. So there could be a dominant offensive lineman that you want to go get now. Cool. Or maybe there's a dominant defensive lineman that you want to go get. Cool. Or other, cornerstone players, maybe a cornerback, maybe a safety, maybe a linebacker, whatever the case may be. You've got to be able to build that team, and they've got to be able to be led with their defense. The defense has to maintain a very high standard. If they don't hold up to that high standard, Kansas City is going to beat you every time. You see the way that the Chargers are trying to build their team. You saw what it looked like year one, and I know that they didn't beat anybody that was an elite team. They didn't do any of that, but they still won double-digit games and got to the playoffs. And you know how Jim Harbaugh is going to want to build it. You saw what's going on in Denver. Pat Surtain, that was the defensive player of the year. Yeah, in Denver, right? So you see what they're trying to do. Bo Nix, I don't think is ever going to be an elite quarterback, but he's probably going to be consistent enough and efficient enough to get done what Sean Payton wants to get done. So now the Raiders have to do that. Again, the recipe's out there. The blueprint's out there. They've got to follow it. Defense, run game, and effective quarterback, right? The second tier. As long as you can get a quarterback, whoever that is, wherever that's at, you can get that second tier quarterback, and a guy that you know that if push comes to shove and he's got to beat you with his arm, he can do it, right? I prefer a guy that can extend some plays with his legs, and I don't necessarily mean a runner, but at least a guy that can scramble around the pocket and make life difficult on the defense. So at least that guy, right? That's what I'm looking at. That's what I think really needs to happen. Of course, you got to have that run game. So the good thing is this draft is really good for running backs. It's a very deep draft for running backs. Quarterbacks, not so much. So that might be something that you address this year. It might be something that you don't address till next year. But that is literally the job of John Spytek, the GM, and Pete Carroll, the head coach, of putting it together in that mold. That mold can beat the Chiefs consistently. We've seen it happen now. We've seen teams get to the Super Bowl and try to outshoot Kansas City. We've seen Buffalo try to outscore Kansas City. We've seen Baltimore try to outscore Kansas City, but didn't have the defensive chops, didn't have the defensive skill set to be able to slow down Patrick Mahomes, punch him in the mouth enough times to make him uncomfortable. The Raiders have to find a way to do that. That is the blueprint. Can they follow it? Will they follow it? That's their challenge for this offseason and multiple offseasons. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts are next at 707-654-4693. It's coming up, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And using FanDuel, you can do live betting. That's a lot of fun. You could back your team, or if you feel like your team's not cutting it, like maybe the Warriors and their new look with Jimmy Butler aren't cutting it, I can always go against them and say, yeah, tonight's not going to be the night, so let me go ahead and make this happen and try to win me some money. You can do that as well. Right now, the new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with ABA Ivan Davis. He's calling to talk about the blueprint to beat the Chiefs as he was watching Super Bowl 59. Here he is, ABA Ivan Davis.
What's up, Q? This is ABA Ivan Davis watching the game, and the Eagles just showed us how to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's that front four. That's exactly what we need to do. Now, I know we need a quarterback and all that good stuff, but our first pick there's going to be some defense. One of them top defensive tackles is going to fall to number 6. We picked that up with Kuntz and my man from Miami and the other defense, Crosby. We can do the same thing. That makes the back end so much better. Okay, we one player away, or we pick up 95 from the Browns. But it'd be way cheaper, though, to pick up somebody from the draft. And then Butler and them for depth. Okay, I wouldn't get rid of nobody on their defensive front. I'd make sure I sign everybody. They just told us how to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Just watch it. Even if the Chiefs come back and win the game, that is the formula. You got to be able to do that the whole game, though. Because as soon as you relax on Kansas City and think you got it won, they come back and they bite you in the rear end. They got no problem putting up 17 points. That's easy for this offense. Okay, unless you can get pressure on Mahomes. Okay, but anyway, have a great day. And go Raiders.
ABA Evan Davis, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. It's always good to hear from you. And, yeah, that's the thing. Talked about in segment number 2. The blueprint's there, right? The Raiders need a lot to build on that and to build what they can do, and they know what they can do and how to do it. They've done it. They can do it. There's multiple different ways to get it done. So if that's the best defensive player falls to them in the draft, you can go that direction. If it's O-line, you can go in that direction. Quarterback, that's cool. It's not an overnight process. So whatever the case may be, it's going to take a lot of work to get there. You know, you've got the salary cap space, you got the draft picks, so you've got to have the right decisions made by the GM, and especially with your own free agents as well. Who to make that blueprint go, who on your squad right now, who part of your free agent class can you bring back to help even start that? And is it worth it? Because they're probably going to want more money, right? Bigger money than what maybe you're willing to give them. So there's a lot of decisions that have to be made by John Spytek and Pete Carroll and company as they try to put this thing together. But you're 100% right. Just like I was talking about in segment number 2, the blueprint is out there. Thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from John in Brentwood. Said, hey, Q, love the show. Listening to the Crosby interview. Question comes up. Why did Crosby sign his original deal if he knew the last 2 years did not include guaranteed money? When does you signed for 2 more years, you signed the contract, shut up and play? Thanks. That's John in Brentwood. Thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. And, well, I wasn't in the room, right? I'm not in the negotiations. I don't know if the conversation came up. I don't know if the conversation came up and said, well, we'll readjust your contract when it comes time. I don't know. Remember, that was a new staff. That was Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels that signed him to that contract extension. So that was 2 staffs ago, which is wild to think, right? I mean, it was Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco last year. It was Dave Ziegler and company before that. So I can't answer that question. The one thing I could tell you is that I don't ever mind when players, when they get as much money as possible, because the guaranteed money is all that ever matters. So whenever we look at contracts and players sign contract extensions, it's like there'll be some big, huge ego number for the agent. And then there's the number that actually matters, which is the guaranteed money. So I can't tell you why that question didn't come up, or if that question didn't come up. I can't speak for Max. That's just, it just kind of is what it is. But I knew that when I looked at his contract situation and knew that he didn't have any guaranteed money, I did know that was going to be a problem. And especially looking at his contract last year when they gave him that extra money on top, right? Remember in training camp when all of a sudden they just gave him an extra $6 million and everyone said, oh, that was just because they really appreciate the player that he is. No, that was to keep him happy with his money, his contract situation, as opposed to other players across the league, the elite players across the league. So, again, I would be just making up something if I gave you an answer, and I don't want to do that to you. So I really can't. So thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next is a call from Darkside Reg. He's calling to respond to the Josh Jacobs interview that was on Friday's podcast. Here's Darkside Reg.
What up, Q? This is Darkside Reg calling out of Long Beach. I was just calling because I heard the Friday's podcast and the Josh Jacobs interview, and I kind of wanted to respond to that. I know you say you never want somebody to lose their job, and usually I'm kind of the same way also. But after hearing what Josh Jacobs had to say, I'm really glad Tom Telesco got fired. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'm happy the man got fired because Josh came to this man, told him, hey, Like, I'll even come back and play on the deal that you guys want to give me, but let me throw some incentives in my contract so that then I can earn a little bit extra money that way, and then everything is on me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll put in the work. I'll make sure I do everything to make sure I hit my numbers. If I hit my numbers, you pay me. If I don't, you don't. I feel like in that situation, that is a win-win, and you're also getting a number one running back, which we could tell during the season that we desperately needed. And this man still said no. I'm glad the dude got fired. I'm just going to say it like that. Glad he got fired, and as you can tell, I feel like nobody else has kind of picked him up. After doing some dumb stuff like that, like it's just kind of shocking to me. Real shocking. And it's also telling. But that's it. That's all I got, Q. Keep up the great work, man. I'll holler. Raiders.
Reggie Reg, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And I don't put that on Tom Telesco. I put the fumble of the Josh Jacobs situation. I put that on Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels. And anyone who's listened to the show for any amount of time knows I have a lot of respect for Dave Ziegler. I think that he did a really good job based off what he had to work with. I think a lot of things were tied behind his back. We all know that he was the GM, and he said he had the final say. But whenever your head coach is hired before the GM, and I know that they were introduced at the same time, but technically Josh McDaniels was hired first, and then Dave Ziegler was hired. It was basically he was going to do as Josh wanted him to do. And so that I always thought that he was in a tougher position, but I would put that fumble on both of those guys before I put it on Telesco. And apparently Telesco never talked to Josh. So that $3 for $30 million contract, that was a Ziegler and McDaniels. Like, I know that was that for a fact. And Telesco, from my understanding, never talked to Josh, and Josh was gone to Green Bay before anything could really happen. But the damage was done by Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels, from my understanding of everything. So thanks so much, Dark Side. Appreciate the call. Up next, got a text from North Texas Raider. What up, Q? It's North Texas Raider. I want to thank you for getting that interview with JJ. It is so nice to finally get the truth on that situation. I was never mad at him because what happened is pretty much what I thought. I'm not mad at the Raiders either. Betting big money on running backs is a gamble these days, but I'm so happy for JJ, not only because of the success with the Packers that he's having, but also that he got the opportunity to talk to the nation and set things right. As always, love what you do for the nation. North Texas Raider out. Thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. And yeah, first and foremost, I was just happy for Josh. And again, having a fun week there in New Orleans on Radio Row. There was a lot of experiences that I had that I wanted to bring to the podcast and not make it a situation where it's, oh, I did this and I did that, and look at me, I'm special. Like, not that. I was just really trying to take everybody behind the scenes of what was going on and kind of experience the same experiences that I was having. So that's why I really kind of leaned into that last week and alongside Ryan Hogue here on the show. And Josh Jacobs was one of those guys, right? I mean, I saw him, what day was it? I saw him on Wednesday, and I was getting ready to jump on ESPN, and we briefly talked. And it was just a big, quick, hey, man, it's good to see you, big hug or whatever. And I told him, hey, man, you did a hell of a job in Green Bay. You had a great season. And that was really it. That was the quick conversation. He was on his way to a station. I was on my way to hop on ESPN. And then I saw him on Thursday, and that's when I got that interview. But again, it was just kind of trying to paint the picture and everything. So again, hopefully everyone appreciated that out there. I thought it was great for Josh to just say what he had to say. And, there's always three sides to every story. There's, one side, the other side, and then there's probably the truth somewhere in the middle, whatever the case may be. So I obviously Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels were not there to say, no, this did not happen that way, or this, they couldn't go about it that way. But I was glad that Josh Jacobs was able to get that off his chest the way he felt. And clearly he wanted to get that off his chest. So, and I'm very happy for his success with the Green Bay Packers. The other thing about this, when it comes to Saquon Barkley, who's now a Super Bowl champ, Derrick Henry, who had a great season in Baltimore, and Josh Jacobs with the Packers, those guys are all elite running backs. But those are teams that were built to be able to win and win now with an elite, not elite quarterback, but elite running back, right? I mean, you saw what Saquon did in Philadelphia, that they needed him to get over the top. You saw how great Lamar was with Derrick Henry this past year, right? That was a difference maker. That's what put Lamar in the conversation, as far as I'm concerned, for MVP because of what he was able to do playing off of Derrick Henry. And then Josh Jacobs, even when their quarterback Jordan Love went down, he was able to take the reins and really be the elder statesman of the team and kind of show them how it's done, and had a very successful season. So, every guy you look at is not going to have the same success with every team, and there's no telling. Maybe Josh Jacobs doesn't score 17 touchdowns on the ground if he's with the Raiders in 2024. But the one thing I do know is that the Raiders needed a running back, a solid, a real deal running back in 2024, and they never had that guy. Zamir White was not that guy. Alexander Madison did his best. Amir Abdullah did his best, right? Dylan Lobby only got a couple carries. I mean, there was a big void there when Josh Jacobs was gone and signed a free agent deal with the Green Bay Packers. But thanks for that text. I do appreciate you. And we got one more. Darren from the 203. He's calling to talk about the Max Crosby situation and kind of reading between the lines. Here he is, Darren from the 203.
Hi, Q. It's Darren calling from the 203. With the Max Crosby stuff, trying to read between the lines, right? It's like, I want to go somewhere with a competitive nature, competitive culture. That should light a fire into the Raiders if we need to bring that competitive culture here, which I think Pete Carroll and John Spytek are going to do. How it sounds, and that's what they've done in the past. Aside from that, I think that how free agency and even the draft playing out, I think that's going to be a large part in his decision, right? If we let every defensive free agent go, right? Spillane, Hobbs, Moreg, all the other names, let them all walk. Maybe Crosby's like, well, all my guys are gone. I don't know if I want to stick around on this defense. Maybe Pat Graham is enough for him to say, I don't really care. It could also be if we start trading away older assets, really tearing down the drywall to evaluate the studs, right? You trade away Myers, you trade away Miller, you trade away even Michael Mayer, I know he's not older, but you get what I'm saying. Like, we just start shedding anything and everything we can to start accumulating youth and draft capital. Then maybe Crosby's like, yeah, this is clearly heading to a rebuilding direction. I want to go to Detroit. I want to go to whoever. Those I can see happening. I don't think the contract will be a point of contention. Like you said, it'll sort itself out. I firmly believe that he's a good enough player for that. But on the flip side, if the Raiders go out and they, trade for Myles Garrett, or Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter falls to us at 6, or Shedeur Sanders falls to us at 6 and Crosby has faith in him, make a move like that where we're getting a foundational piece that can compete alongside or, opposite side of the ball of Max. It really push the team. That's when Max probably be like, okay, I see it. Give me my, 4-year, $125 million, whatever it's going to be, 78 guaranteed, something like that. Random number off the top of my head. My point being is that I think by mid-April, right, draft time, we'll know. We'll know whether he said something or not. We'll know. And yeah, so that's my take on that. I'm not panicking. If he moves, it is what it is. I prefer for him not to, but nothing can really hurt me after being at a workout for football at like 6 a.m. and my coach just walking in and go, "Where's?" I'm like, right here. He's like, "I'm so sorry," and Khalil Mack was gone. So that's it for me.
Darren, thanks so much. Appreciate you. And yeah, you bring up some good points and good suggestions. The bottom line is that the Raiders need some really good players, and they need to have a really good plan. They need to have not a plan, but they need to have the plan. Just like when they moved on from Derek Carr, I said they can't just grab a quarterback. They need to get the quarterback, and they didn't fill that void yet. Well, they need to make sure that they have a plan that is the plan when it comes to Max Crosby as well. That's what he wants to hear. Not only does he want his guaranteed money, right? He wants his contract, evolved and taken care of and restructured or whatever, however you want to word it. That's what he wants. But he also wants to have the plan, the formula to how this team is going to win, because he ultimately wants to do that as well. So, again, I don't think he's going anywhere. I said it off top, but until everything's set in motion, we'll never know 100%. We'll close out with a text from the 937. Said, "What up, Q? First and foremost, I want to shout out my son, Coben. Since his birthday was February 7th, he's turning the big 11. He's also a Raider fan, just wanting to see some wins. Also, just wanted to pick your brain on what we might do in the draft since we now have Chip Kelly. Do you think we'll get Emeka Buka somewhere in the first round, then go and get Will Howard in the second if he goes in the second round of the draft, since there is some familiarity there? Thanks for what you and Ari do. Raiders. That's a text from the 937. Thanks so much, and happy birthday to your son. I know it's a couple days late, but shout out to him anyway. We definitely appreciate you and him. And I don't know if there's going to be a bunch of Ohio State guys all of a sudden added to the mix because Chip Kelly's there. You know, obviously Will Howard being the quarterback, that's an easy tie-in right there. But I don't know if that's what Pete Carroll wants to do. I don't know if that's how they want to construct this team together. So I think there's a possibility. The good thing is that if they have anybody on from Ohio State that they want to check out or they're interested in, they might want to bring him in. They have a guy in Chip Kelly that they can bounce their ideas off and say, hey, give me the rundown, give me the lowdown on who this guy is and what he brings to the table. So at least at the end of the day, what I can guarantee you about Ohio State players is that the Raiders will have all the intel they need on all those guys. They have a guy that knows them very well. So they'll have the insight where they don't have to go and do more research. They can just pick the brains of Chip Kelly. This offseason is going to be very interesting, very intriguing. The quarterback situation is going to be talked about quite a bit with the Raiders. And obviously Max Crosby is going to be talked about quite a bit with the Raiders as well, and how they're going to put everything together and get this team to be competitive and fighting in the AFC West. And again, how close to that blueprint that is out there of how to beat the Chiefs can the Raiders, how much can they put that together? Can they put that together? Obviously, we'll continue to talk about that throughout the course of the week and throughout the course of the off season. I also real quick just wanted to shout out that I got this new show coming up starting today with Joe Fortenbaugh. A lot of you that are from the West Coast or maybe even from the Bay Area probably recognize Joe from 95.7 The Game when he was there for a long time. Also on ESPN. He was in Vegas for a long time on the TV show, The Betting Line on ESPN. Now he's based out of Connecticut, out of Bristol. And, of course, he does some shows from New York as well. Me and him start a show today. So it starts at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. to noon, based off of what time you're listening to this. It might already be over. It might be getting ready to get started, but you can check that out on ESPN and the ESPN app. Really proud of that. Just, again, to continue to see, the progress that I'm making there on ESPN. And, again, just want to kind of share that with you as well. So that'll be 9 a.m. to noon Pacific time, noon to 3 Eastern time. So depending on where you live, is basically depends on what time it comes on. But excited about that as well. And, of course, every once in a while I'll update you and let you know how that show's going. But we'll be back tomorrow with more conversation. We'll have more news and notes. We'll try to get caught up on all the coaches that the Raiders have hired, what they brought in, what positions they're filling, what that means. We're going to try to do that coming up tomorrow as I get a little bit of time to research and get caught up with everything that I may have missed while I was in New Orleans on Radio Row. So we'll do that tomorrow. And, of course, more of your calls and texts at 707-654-4693. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.